we have a dynamic lady here. Betty is the mother I never had, and the one I'm so glad I've got now.
I'm very old.
I'm probably older than you are, but we won't go there. Age doesn't make a difference. You know, it's funny, I met Betty when I first came to Montreal. I moved here, didn't know a soul, packed up everything, and I was attending a women's networking meeting, and Betty gave a presentation, and I took one of her little cards. I had it in my day runner for about 5 years, and then through Leanne says, God, I just met this really dynamic woman, BettyHealey. She's got this company named Road Signs. And I opened up my day runner, and there was Betty's little card. These wonderful cards that ask questions, that invite us to look at our values, look at what is really meaningful in life. And I said, you're kidding, BettyHealey? Yeah, she was 40 minutes from here. She's got this amazing retreat about a labyrinth. And so I went to one of Betty's workshops while Leanne was at the Juicy Women's Symposium. And the result is today. I had spent my mother and I, my real mother, we had a kind of an odd relationship. I was kind of the caretaker, and she passed away after 7 very tough years. And I was empty. I had lost my energy, I had lost myself. And rather than following a lot of the great advice here today, I fell apart. I couldn't find myself. And I just got weaker and weaker, and, really was giving up on life. Really was giving up. And slowly, I knew self-care backed that up, and I started. And I spent the weekend with Betty, and it was like, hey, I just took a little time for me and got my mojo back. And again, this is a result of that. My calling is to be of service, and I thank Leanne and all these amazing women in this community that have provided me this opportunity to be of service. So, without any further ado, I will give a little more formal introduction to Betty. BettyHealey is a life coach, an award-winning author of 4 books. Her most recent book, Me First, If I Should Wake Before I Die, and the Me First playbook, which is fabulous. It takes these learnings and just makes it fun. Again, it's dedicated to the 7 directions of awakening to your full potential. Betty and her wonderful husband, Jim, who has helped us with our audiovisual today, they have generously volunteered their time here. They have created this amazing retreat in their home, and really invite you to enjoy her wonderful presentation. Betty has a Master of Education in Psychology from McGill University with a specialty in adult learning. She's a licensed Lumina Learning practitioner and facilitator. She launched her company, Road Signs, a coaching and consulting firm dedicated to awakening the spirit in the workplace back in 1997. And here she is today. Betty, it's all yours. Thank you so much.
December 21st, 1967. I got a phone call from a lovely young fellow named Jim. Now, I was pretty impressed because Jim was the high school hero of St. Lawrence High. He was the all-around Mr. Athlete. He was the athletic leader. He was everything I had ever dreamed of dating. But I couldn't understand why he called me. You see, I was the wallflower, the great introvert, the academic nerd. Despite my feelings about myself, I had the wisdom to say yes. And to keep saying yes. And on June 9th, 1973, we were wed. But I still couldn't understand why he chose me. Because you see, I was nothing. I didn't feel worth it. I didn't feel like I deserved it. I knew I had God-given gifts, but I couldn't see them, and I couldn't appreciate them. And so one day, well, not one day, repeatedly, I asked him, why me? You were the hero. I mean, you could have chosen anybody in the high school. Why did you choose me? And he said, because I saw your diamond. Yeah, he's a keeper. The trick was I couldn't see my diamond, not for a long time. I didn't know that I was worthwhile, or that I was special, or that I was unique in any way, that I had gifts to give to the world, like so many of us. Don't we all have that time in our life when we're just wondering, and what will it take to wake us up to the truth that lives within us? What will it take? And what keeps us from going there? Let me show you an image of my mind. Does it resemble yours? I call this, of course, monkey mind, or the self-critic. And I have frequently looked at my mind and said, what the hell is that? Only to see that it's a mess. It's a mess. And what's stored in there? We talked about that earlier today. I mean, Sharon was talking about it this morning, and of course, Joanna talked about it. It's a lot of stories. The thing is, we have to question whether or not the story is true. I loved when you put up the slide about the blank canvas, because I have this belief. There's a great story by an author called Gordon Mackenzie. He was out west, and for many years he was the creative director for Hallmark Cards. But in his book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball, the last chapter talks about painting your canvas. And he talks about how we're born with a little blank canvas rolled under our arms. And then some wise adult comes along and says, I'm going to take that for you because you don't really know what to do with it or what to paint on it. And I'm going to put some blue lines on there. And then I'm going to invite you to paint by number. And those are called the life rules, right? The life rules. And they come from our teachers, our preachers. They come from our friends, our colleagues. They keep adding on the entire life until one day we wake up and say, damn, I hate this. And then you start sneaking outside the blue lines, and then suddenly you look around, see if anyone's watching you, and you pull it back in. But one day you wake up and you say, no more. I'm going to paint the biggest, darndest, most vibrant dragon that you ever want to see. So here today, my friends, it's time to start painting our dragons. We're going to be told a lot of stories in our lifetime. And our main goal, our main reason for being on the planet is to remember who we are, who we came into the world to be. Who we came into the world to be. And we were all lights, and we still are. Somewhere along the line, the diamond just got covered up with a little bit of muck, maybe some concrete. Sometimes we need jackhammers, and sometimes we just need polishing cloths. But it is really time to remember. Now, going back to and we all want to sparkle. So to do that, we're going to have to confront some things. One of the things that Sharon talked about this morning was we have to start listening in. We have to start understanding what we're actually telling ourselves, because we've all got a story. Now, I call this story, our story comes from our self-critic. And the self-critic, as one of my retreat participants said to me one time, she said, I don't know about you, but I don't have one critic, I've got a whole goddamn choir. To which we now refer to as, and you're welcome to quote me, the itty bitty shitty committee. Right? Don't you love that? The itty bitty shitty. Yeah, well, I won't say it again. And you know what? She covers up our sparkle. The thing I've also learned is because when I started to wake up, After asking Jim for years and years and years, why did you choose me? I realized I had to start seeing my own diamond. How was I going to do it? Because the voice in my head, that picture I showed you a couple minutes ago, was so big it overtook everything. And one day I turned 37. And I looked around my life and I thought, I had a great job. I was just starting back to school to do my master's degree in education, which was my passion. I've been a physiotherapist before that, not my passion. Great job, not my passion. Go find something else. Knew I wanted to teach, to speak, to share. Didn't know how to do it. Had all of that. I had a great husband, as you already are aware. He was still with me. And you know what he used to say to me? He said, you know that self-critic stuff you're dealing with, that itty-bitty shitty committee? He said, you want to go play with them? Be my guest, but I'm not joining you. He would challenge me. I am not going in there with you. And I go, aw, I'd have to go play by myself. But I was getting lonely. And I was getting depressed. Seriously, I was getting depressed. And I thought, so I could go see a psychologist, or I could go get some counseling, or I could go dig up all the old from this past, or I could get on with it. And I started basically treating myself. And so the work I do now is predicated on that. And the first thing I did was I started listening to what I was saying to myself, and I learned the following. I didn't have much very nice to say to myself. Have you ever listened in on your own inner dialogue, anybody? Would you say those words to anybody else? No. Well, of course not. So why would we do it to ourselves? Someone was just out at our table and asked me about what me first means. Is it self-care? Yeah. But the biggest piece of it is? Oh, well, let me ask you a question first. Do any of you have something in your life you would like to change or shift? First. Right here. You know, in the last many years, we've talked a lot about the law of attraction. And I think people fundamentally get it, or not. Because if like really attracts like, what we have to understand is that whatever we want here has to be an attractive or perfect match to what goes on in here. And I'll give you a classic example because it was one of mine. I come home and say to Jim, you know, I don't know why, but I just don't feel like I get any respect at work. You know, my colleagues are always crapping on me, and I know I'm doing a good job, but I just don't get it. And he had the wisdom to look at me and say, well, what do you think he asked me? Do you respect you? You know, at times I have wanted to slap him. But I don't have it. So far, he's not suffered any spousal abuse. Yeah, do you respect you? And my reality was I had no respect for me. And I was in this conversation that I had to change, and I had to start thinking about, can I start, instead of criticizing myself all the time, start approving of myself? Can I switch my inner critic to my inner coach? Can I start having spiritually uplifting conversations with myself versus spiritually depleting conversations with myself? What would that look like? Well, the first place you have to start is by actually becoming consciously aware of what the inner dialogue is. So I'm going to take a moment and be quiet. Does everyone have a handout? So take a moment and just in the left-hand column, write down something that your critic typically says to you.
Is that what Stacey happened?
Yeah, you can fill the whole page, Joanna, if you want. We can start with one. You're going to have this exercise to go home with. But just suddenly become consciously aware. What have I been telling myself? I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I have no talents. I have no gifts. I'm stupid. I'm overweight. I'm fat. That was a big one of mine, by the way. I'm fat. Oh, here's my biggest one. My mother, Betty Jane, don't do it. You might fall and get hurt. Big one. I don't want to tell you, well, maybe I should tell you a quick story about where that started. About 4 or 5 years ago, my husband and I embarked on a little bit of a journey, and he sent me to a conference, and I thought I'd get back at him. I signed him up for another one called Beyond Courage. Gotta like that, don't you? Anyway, I signed myself up because of that old message from my mom, Betty Jane, don't try it, you might fall, get hurt. I had not a lot of physical awareness, and I would never challenge myself physically because I was always afraid to fall. I get to this course, day 1, first activity, climb to the top of a telephone pole. Go from the last step up onto the telephone pole and stand tall. Leap from said telephone pole and grab a trapeze and swing there, and then release and allow your team to lower you to the ground. Okay, might as well get this over with right away because I know all the other stuff's going to be easy after today. Get to the top of the telephone pole. No problem. Mother, Betty Jane, don't take that last step because you'll fall and you'll get hurt. Okay, I held the record for 150 people who were at that retreat. I was at the top of the pole the longest. Seriously. Finally, I looked at the critic and I said, guess what? It's an old story. I can't fall. I'm on a harness. And I've got 15 people down below supporting me. So, then the critic says, don't do it because if you try and you miss, you will have failed. To which I finally got the gumption to say no. If I don't try it, that would be failure. So if I slip, that will be success. So, okay, gotta know, 59-year-old knees, I get one leg up on the pole. I get the other one in kneel position, and with all my might, I push and push and push until I am standing, and then the pole and I are really just vibrating. And my team captain below said, Betty, tuck in your butt and bend your knees. And I go, bend. And everything stopped. And then I looked up and I saw the Pacific Ocean and I saw the mountains. And then I jumped and gave the greatest whoop of my life. Hee-haw! I grabbed that damn trapeze and got lowered to the ground. And it was the most exhilarating moment of my life. And I thought, what if I hadn't have talked her out? What if I hadn't have talked the critic out and allowed her to become my coach? To know that I could do it. It was just fear that was keeping me back. So, whatever you wrote down, would anyone like to share one? That will help us. Would anyone care to share something their critic is? Yes.
I tell myself I'm disorganized all the time.
You're disorganized all the time. And what's the consequence of that? How does that make you feel?
Imperfect.
Imperfect. Oh, geez. Tired.
Deficient.
Can I offer you an affirmation that your coach might give you?
Please.
I am perfect just as I am. I am perfect just as I am. Because that whole thing about not enough time and confusion and chaos comes from the desire for perfection. And it is a killer. And just to know I am perfect the way I am. I am perfect in this day, in this moment. I am good enough. Thank you. Another one?
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Oh, Monique?
Someone might not like me.
Oh my goodness, someone might not like me. Which means you don't like you. Actually. Not just to take it back, because we will fear not being liked if we aren't in like with ourselves. Does that make sense? So one of the affirmations would be to really get back into one of the affirmations that we talk about at the very opening of Me First is, I love myself unconditionally. And I'm trying to think of the tail end, but I'm looking at Jim. Do you remember it? No, I have unconditional high regard for me. That's the one. I have unconditional high. I hold myself. I even like that better. I hold myself. I embrace myself with unconditional high regard. And as you do that, almost feel yourself. Often put your hand over your heart and one hand over your power chakra. I hold myself in unconditional love and high regard. And really hold yourself with that embrace. Now, I will tell you, when you first start doing this work, you don't necessarily believe it. And I started this work intuitively, only to find out about 4 years ago that there's this whole new field of study called positive psychology. And what positive psychology is looking at is the field of what we call neural reprogramming. Neural reprogramming. Now, I had to laugh when I heard this because I thought, my God, I'm a physiotherapist. I used to work with stroke patients, and I would teach them how to use an arm or a leg or something again, and that was neural reprogramming. Now we're learning that we can reprogram our emotions. Well, is it easy? Not always. And I liken it, perfect example this winter. I liken it to winter. I like to go snowshoeing. Anybody else like to snowshoe, right? What's it like the first time you go out? And the snow is quite deep. What's it like, Natalie? Is it hard or easy?
When the snow...
When fresh and deep, what's it like?
No, it demands.
Yeah, it demands. And you really have to lift up, and tromp it down. Now, what would happen if you went out the next day and you walked the same path?
Well, the trail is made, is it?
Yeah, the trail is made. So this is what you do with neural reprogramming, because we are, by the way, conditioned to be mean to ourselves.
But why?
But why? Because we used to have to respond really quick, and it's called fight or flight. And we don't need to do that anymore, but we're pre-programmed for negativity. And so we have to really condition ourselves now for positivity, if you will. So the reason you need to recognize what your critic is telling you and to write it down and record it is so that you can actually write a new script. Right? So old script, I'm going in this direction for 30 years and now I want to create a new pathway. First time's going to feel a little rough and hard. Got to lift those legs pretty high to get that pathway going. Second time, a little easier. Third time, a little easier. But the thing is, you have to become consciously aware. So if I say, I'm not perfect, I'm too busy, I'm too that, I am perfectly imperfect. I'm too busy, blah, 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 I'm perfectly imperfect. I'm afraid no one will like me, I hold myself in high regard. I'm afraid no one will like me, and you keep going until one day that becomes your default mechanism. I'll be honest with you, when I started this work at 37, I would say I felt good about myself about 10% of the time. These days, I would say 10% of the time the critic catches me off guard. By the way, she or he never really goes away. You just learn to manage it. And you start realizing it. And unfortunately, people will say to me, Betty, this is really hard work. And I say, yeah, I know. But you know what? It's the only work you came here to do. Because you're the only one who can shine your light. And it's important work. Important work. I had a clicker at one point in time. I did. So this is how we want to start talking to ourselves. And I want you to be normal and weird. I found this slide recently. I don't know if you can all see it all. I'm a cat lover. We have Max and Cleo and Tasha and Chakra. Yeah, we named our last cat Chakra. So, but yeah, normal is your definition of normal. It comes with no rules, no boundaries. Start painting outside the lines. One of the things I'm going to invite you to start doing today also, and if you turn to the second page of your handout, I want to talk to you about something I call self-acknowledgement. Because this is another way that we can start feeding our coach's voice. Part of my gratitude practice every evening is to do at least one self-acknowledgement. Let me share with you why. Well, first of all, To self-acknowledge oneself is to say, I acknowledge myself for being a fun-loving person and a kick-ass speaker. Now, even as I say that in front of you, I can feel that little bit not quite true, that little bit of shaky stuff that comes up here. The thing is, I love this. I love the opportunity to talk to you. I acknowledge myself for doing what I love. That moment of acknowledgement is everyone familiar with Marianne Williamson's poem? Our deepest fear. And she says at the end, I'll paraphrase, as we let our light shine, we give other people permission to do the same. So self-acknowledgement is about allowing your light to shine. It is not egotistical. It is not being conceited. And all those things that your mother or your father or your teacher, whoever it was, influenced you when you were growing up and said, you can't talk about yourself that way, you're bragging. That's a lie. Because you were born with God-given gifts. And here's the way I understand self-acknowledgement. In my view, it is the highest form of gratitude. And it's like a thank you to God. It says, as you speak to yourself in the evening, and you express gratitude for your day, and you include one gratitude for you. And after all that good stuff that happened to me, Spirit, today I acknowledge myself for my gift of inviting people into a conversation, or my gift of being an amazing medical intuitive, or my gift of sharing my story, whatever that is. And you're thanking your higher power because she put you on earth for a reason. And our ability then to get away from the critic and the old story and start living who we really are is the most important lesson of life. So self-acknowledgement is the highest form of gratitude. So I'm going to ask you right now to take a moment and write it in the thought. You'll see at the top. It doesn't say, I would like to acknowledge myself for, or I might acknowledge it. It is, I acknowledge myself for. Complete the sentence. Write down a couple of things that you want to acknowledge yourself for. Great mother. Go deeper with it, because what makes you a great mother? Is it that you're compassionate? Is that you're a good listener? Is it that you're understanding? Is it that you build your kids up? That you affirm them? Because just saying you're a great mom is a bit of a cop-out. It's like an umbrella statement. So nail it down and be more specific. I'm a really great wife. Jim's not here. I'm really good dad. He's not here to refute that. Oh my God, I think that's on tape. The whole world knows now. And it's a lie, no. Who knows?
What does your coach say?
What's that?
What does your coach say?
Well, yeah, what my coach would say, oh honey, you rock. That's because I practice the abundance all the time. Which is a very good move for, better activity. Now, would anyone like to share one of their acknowledgements with me? This takes a bit of courage. Would anyone like to share one? Yes, Carrie.
I acknowledge yourself for trying really hard.
Oh boy, is this a coaching moment? Take that TR. I have two three-letter words that I'm going to ask you to banish from your vocabulary. The first is TRY. Try, do or do not, there is no try. Who said that? Yoda. And the other one is BUT. But. The self-critic is great at butting yourself. So Carrie, stand up, please.
That was the first thing I wrote. I didn't say it.
Come up here with me, honey. We got Dan. She's a great. Did anyone hear her say Dan? So if you were going to acknowledge Carrie, what would one of you tell her? What a great voice. Carrie, I acknowledge myself for having a great voice. Yes, I do.
I acknowledge myself for having a, do I have to use great?
Well, whatever you want. Choose the adjective. I acknowledge.
I acknowledge myself for being sick.
No. I acknowledge myself for having a great voice.
I acknowledge myself for having a great voice.
All right.
And that's it. See, but that's exactly what I heard. I acknowledge myself for being a great songwriter. Yes. See, do you see what's happening? And this is only because her critic is coming in and kicking her in the butt and saying, "It's not true, Carrie. Don't say it out loud. It's not true." It is true. It is true. I acknowledge myself for being a great songwriter.
I acknowledge myself for being a great songwriter.
Yes. You see how hard that is? Make it easy. Just start. It starts with one tiny step. Just start doing it. You don't have to do what Carrie just did. You don't have to step up here and you don't have to go to the highest mountain and say, "I acknowledge myself for being," whatever. Say it. Start by saying it to yourself. And by the way, do it. Think about this. At night when you sit with your partner or your children, how powerful would this be? Eleanor, I acknowledge you for being the most inspiring spiritual person who calls herself a priest for a very long time. Thank you. Who else? Daniela, I acknowledge you for your amazing gifts of facilitation and coaching. Wow, would that be that we all started doing that? And it's always in that vocabulary. Hold yourself true to it. I acknowledge for, because it's direct. There's no sliding to, I would like to try, or acknowledge myself for trying. There is no trying. You are or you aren't. Either in the game or you're not. Be in the game. Yes?
So what's the third word that's been banned?
No, I start to say three, and it is two. It's really the but and the TRY.
I kind of missed it.
Try?
Yeah, try is not good.
No. Well, because if you're trying, you're neither there or not.
And what's the other?
But. Replace buts with ands. See, it goes like this. I really did a good job today, but I could have done better. Just made yourself wrong. Everything that came before that, I acknowledged myself today for having a great speech, but I did a hiccup and I forgot to say something. Always making yourself wrong. I had a great time today. I had a great talk, and yeah, there were things I might add next time, but it didn't negate what came before it. Does that make sense? So this acknowledgement we just did in the practice. Here's the thing I want to say, and Sharon mentioned this morning. Change is a process, and you need to start one step at a time. And so the thing that I encourage you to do is to bring your acknowledgement into your gratitude practice. If you don't have one, I encourage you to start one at night. And have one self-acknowledgement in there. And do it every day for 21 days. Because we do know from psychological studies that to change a habit or to create a new habit, it takes repetition. So if you want to forge that neural pathway that's going in a different direction, and you want to start feeding your coach and feeding yourself spiritually and emotionally, then you practice. And I kind of reassure you, because it has been my experience, that the coach's voice will raise in power and the critic's voice will diminish. Imagine it like two rheostats. I always say, dimmer switches, where you're actually turning up the light on the coach and turning down the light on the critic. And the more you steal the critic's fuel by feeding yourself coach, the lower the volume goes. And just practice. Does that make sense? Any questions? The next thing, and again, it's so interesting, the synchronicity, because I know that Sharon mentioned this morning. Our choir, our critical coach, or itty bitty shitty committee, gets fed by the energy vampires in our life. Anyone, energy vampires. You know, those people that kind of stick their fangs in and suck you dry? Anyone got any of those in your life? And unfortunately, we're related to some of them. That's just too bad, right? The thing is that, and the other thing that's going to happen, when you start lighting up, when you start really polishing your diamond, some people are going to come up to you and say, wow, Rosie, I don't know what you're doing, but did you do something to your hair that's different? Is that a new color for you? Oh, it must be new glasses. Because they're starting to see that you're shining. Something changes about your aura. Joanna was talking about your aura. And Jim and I can actually measure it. We use dowsing as a tool, and we measure people's auras. And some of the people in the room have done that work with us. Your aura expands when you shine from the inside out. And people will experience that, but they won't know why. But they'll look for something that they tangible, because it's not tangible. And some of them will say, we'll push you back. There's a great story, by the way. If you ever go fishing on the East Coast and you talk to any crab fishermen, you'll notice that when the boats go out and they throw the crabs in a pot, they never have to put a cover on the pot. So the curiosity is, why would you have to do that? Because don't you think the crabs would try to escape? You know what happens? When a crab tries to get out of the pot, the other crabs pull him back in. So you never have to put a lid on a crab pot. So stop hanging with crabs. Moral of the story. Limit the number of crabs in your life, because they will want to pull you right back into the pot with them. Start surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who lift you up, who believe you, who see you, who will unconditionally love you, and who will, on the occasion, as Joanna says, challenge you. But from a compassionate place. Will simply say, you can do better than that, because I see you. You can't hide from me. I see your diamond. I want you to see it. Do you think that if Jim had decided to travel with me and my self-critic on all those many journeys we took, I'd be here today? Absolutely not. He said, I'm not going there with you, and I'm not playing that game. Best thing, I hated it for him. No, I didn't hate it. Strong word. I really disliked it at the time, and it was the only thing he could have done. Because it was the thing that made a difference. So do it for yourself. Not going there anymore. How is that serving me? Surround yourself with people who absolutely see you. And you know, I have learned one thing in life. My father left my life when I was 13. My mother died when I was 23. I have a brother who spent his life in the military, and then there's me. And, you know, military and me don't look a lot alike. So we don't naturally get along. So I learned a long time ago that I have to create my own family. I'm very fortunate to have Jim, but I also think that these gatherings that we have like this is for us to find our new family, our new community. And we're all craving for it. That I know. So just bear that in mind. Now, I'm going to ask you to turn to the third page of your handout. Some of you will have pages that have something highlighted on it. Does anyone have a highlighted page? Good, thank you. All right. So here, one of the other things I do on the side, something Eleanor and I may have in common, is I also marry people. And I don't do a lot of weddings. But the wedding vows came from I receive a lot of the things that I'm supposed to write. So, I don't always know how to figure that out. It just kind of comes in. How many of you in the room are married? How many, when you walked down the aisle to make your vows to another person, was that pretty easy? Yeah? Why? No. Well, for those of you who said it was easy, why was it easy?
Because I knew that he was nation.
Yeah. So you're vowing to love, honor, and cherish somebody else. So guess what? And what would it be like if what if the pre-marriage course, the preparation course said, well, before you marry anybody else, you got to marry you? What if? What would that be like? Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of marriages probably would be more successful if that happened, right? I'll be honest, I was married at 23, and yes, I've been with Jim already since I was 17, and I willingly walked down the aisle and married him. Best decision I ever made in my life. But if you had asked me that day, could I vow to myself what I vowed to him, what do you think the answer would have been? No. So I'm going to ask you to join us. We're going to read together the wedding vows. And for those who has the very first vow highlighted? Oh, isn't that interesting? So we're going to read them together, and each person who has one of the lines highlighted, just follow along, and when it's your turn, if you would stand and read the vow. And if you wish to read the vows with the person who's leading it, I invite you to feel what this feels like inside of yourself. Eleanor, would you lead us off?
Repeat after me, no.
Yeah.
I vow to hold myself in unconditional love and high regard.
Take it in. I said earlier what's important to me. Someone asked me, I said peace. The thing is, we can't have peace in the world until we find peace within. So I wish for you peace within, joy, prosperity, purpose, passion, all the things you've heard today. And one of the things I've done recently is, after 30 years hiatus, I went back to find my inner artist, and this is my most recent painting called Dancing in the Light. And so find your passion, get your creative outlets going. You are all magnificent. I see your diamonds, and I hope that you will see yours. And just in a last word, in your packages today, and your goodie bags, you will find one of my books. And I'll ask you tomorrow to only open the book and read the very last chapter, which is called The Gift Certificate. And I ask you that because my mother died when I was quite young. I decided that I would imagine the letter that she would write to me. And I would ask you, if you have a daughter or a son, if you would pass the letter on to them. And it's about an invitation to really live your life from courage, authenticity, love, and grace. And finally, if you haven't visited us already, we're out at the Road Signs Coach. You may want to pick up your Me First book or playbook, but we are also introducing today our self-study guide, which is just, my work comes from what people ask me for. And because you love me so much, you even get to watch several different 5-minute YouTube videos that are embedded in the book. But no, if you are curious and interested, drop by. And if I might just introduce you to my wonderful husband, Jim. Wave. And with me today is my amazing niece and goddaughter, Megan. Megan, could you bring your basket up? A few of you have dropped by the booth today, and we said we were going to have a draw. And so Megan is going to draw the name. This is her first. She's not accustomed to standing up in public, so this is her introduction. So you can pick the name. All right, and the winner of our gift today is Sandy Brassico. So Sandy, just provide the booth after. Thank you. All right, and I think I'm done. My time apparently, I think, is pretty much up. And